The hush of evening lay heavy over the forest, a hush broken only by the soft stir of iridescent leaves that glimmered like fireflies when touched by the moonlight. For 3 months, I, Dr. Evelyn Carter, had roamed this anomalous region in search of the hidden mysteries rumored to dwell beneath its ancient canopy. It was a forest unlike any other, a place where bioluminescent flowers pulsed in time with one another, as though connected by an unseen rhythm, an otherworldly heartbeat that neither human logic nor conventional science could readily explain. Far from the nearest city, removed from the comfort of modern highways, this realm lured me deeper into its silent depths each night, beckoning my curiosity with a glow both gentle and haunting. My mentor, Dr. Richard Hayes, had accompanied me on this expedition. He was a man of strict logic, a firm believer in the power of data and observation. Yet, even Dr. Hayes could not disguise his wonder when he beheld the ghostly halos of purple and green shimmering across the vine-covered trunks, as if the forest itself was alive with a conscious energy. I was 28 years old at the time, yet I felt far older as I trod the soft earth underfoot, inhaling the faint scent of wet moss and nighttime blossoms. My footsteps were guided by luminous petals that seemed to drift through the air as though carried by invisible currents. It was in that silent immensity, when only the faint buzzing of insects and the distant hoot of a night owl could be heard, that I sensed something, a presence lurking at the edge of my awareness. If this extraordinary forest was alive, then it had secrets it yearned to share, secrets waiting just beyond the limits of sight. That night, as the moon rose in a great silver arc, I paused in a clearing where luminous mushrooms formed a pale ring near the foot of a twisted oak. I glimpsed a cluster of lights in the distance, dancing among the tall ferns. My heart fluttered with anticipation. It was there, in that moment, that my life changed forever. I had not yet laid eyes on Kael, the alien from an ancient race, but I felt him watching from somewhere in the darkness, his faint telepathic murmurs weaving into my dreams. Even now, recalling that first silent exchange, a tremor runs through me. For if the forest had awakened, so too had my destiny. It was on a damp morning, following a long, sleepless night, that I finally discovered the wounded being. As I emerged from my tent, I caught sight of a strange disturbance in the foliage about 50 yards from my campsite. The luminous leaves swayed rhythmically, as though parted by an invisible hand, and I picked my way carefully toward the disturbance. My breath caught in my throat when I saw him. Kael, the alien, collapsed against a moss-covered stump, his skin pale with a faint, iridescent sheen, as though capturing the glow of the forest itself. He was slender, taller than a human by perhaps a hand's breadth, and possessed of long arms that ended in fingers slightly too elongated to be earthly. His head bore ridges across the crown, delicate lines reminiscent of flowing water etched into stone. His eyes, half-lidded with exhaustion, glimmered a peculiar shade of blue so deep it bordered on violet. Blood, a shimmering emerald color, trickled from a gash along his side. I stood transfixed, torn between scientific excitement and a deeply human empathy that demanded I help the fallen creature. Though I had never seen his like, my instincts overruled fear, and I approached him with caution, softly speaking in the hopes of reassuring him. Kael's body tensed at first, but the moment I knelt and extended my hands, offering aid, his eyes locked onto mine, and an almost electric warmth rippled through me. A vague voice entered my consciousness, an inaudible whisper that spoke not in words but in emotions, a plea for understanding. With trembling hands, I used my medical kit to clean and dress his wound, marveling at how his body radiated faint pulses of light at every gentle touch. By the time Dr. Hayes found me, I was already cradling Kael's head, coaxing small sips of water between his parted lips. My mentor's eyes widened. He did not speak for several seconds, stunned by the spectacle. At last, in a voice subdued by awe, he murmured, "We must get him to the medical tent. This is beyond any specimen we've ever encountered." I nodded, heart pounding, and together we carefully carried Kael to our makeshift camp. The forest seemed to sigh around us, as though offering a benediction. Even Dr. Hayes, ever the pragmatist, seemed to sense that something monumental had taken place, that history had, in some quiet sense, shifted course beneath the whispering branches of that otherworldly woodland. Thus began the fragile bond between Kael and the first humans who dared to protect him. Kael recovered slowly. For days, he lay prone, stirring only when necessary, allowing his body the time it needed to heal. During that period of watchful care, I pored over every inch of his physiology with scientific curiosity. I noted the subtleties of his alien biology, the faint pattern of luminescence across his chest when he breathed, the slight transparency of his skin near the temples, and the curious metallic hue that shimmered in his hair. It was, however, his mind that intrigued me most. In moments of clarity, I felt a gentle push upon my consciousness, like the echo of a voice calling from far away. Then the impressions would fade, leaving me thirsting for more, unsure if I had only imagined them. Once Kael's strength improved, we worked out a rudimentary means of communication. I would speak softly, in slow English, while Kael responded with emotional impressions, pictures, and a scattering of syllables that he attempted to mimic from my words. Amid these attempts, fragments of a larger story emerged. Kael was a member of an ancient race, a people so entwined with Earth's past that legends of them had long since become myth. They arrived eons ago, drawn to Earth's peculiar climate and rich biodiversity. Through subtle interventions, they had once fostered stability in Earth's environment, protecting the planet from catastrophic shifts. Yet mankind remained blissfully unaware of their presence, perceiving only the gentle rhythms of a natural world that seemed, at the time, endless and invulnerable. Kael's race had gradually withdrawn from Earth, returning to a distant home where they believed their guardianship was no longer required. But now, centuries later, Earth's climate stood in peril, battered by the reckless pursuits of men. Storms and droughts ravaged the land. The delicate balance that Kael's ancestors had so carefully maintained was teetering on the brink. Somewhere, hidden across the globe, lay ancient mechanisms that could be reawakened to restore equilibrium. Kael had come, alone and in secret, to find them, to mend the errors of both alien neglect and human folly. My heart pounded when I realized the implications. In my own modest sphere of ecology, I had long suspected that Earth's environment was in a precarious state, that a tipping point loomed close. But never had I imagined there might be devices, created by a benevolent alien civilization, that could tilt the scales back toward harmony. Though Dr. Hayes greeted the notion with equal parts fascination and doubt, he could not deny that Kael's presence was real, or that the forest's bizarre phenomena might be tied to secrets older than human history. Thus did we vow to help Kael, to keep his existence secret until we knew more. The alien's welfare now rested upon our shoulders, and the weight of that responsibility pressed upon me each moment. I could see in his eyes a mix of hope and concern, as though he understood how fragile our alliance was. I soothed him with murmured reassurances, with the gentle brush of a hand upon his shoulder, convinced that no matter how daunting the path ahead, humanity could rise to the challenge. News travels in strange ways, especially within the hushed corridors of government agencies, always hungry for intelligence, always suspicious of anomalies. It was no surprise then that whispers of an unidentified being eventually found their way to the ears of officials tasked with ensuring national security. Within a week of Kael's arrival at our camp, we received a surprise visitor, Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, a tall, imposing figure who carried with him the distinct air of authority. He arrived under the guise of assisting our ecological research. Yet his penetrating stare and pointed questions about unusual sightings betrayed his true intentions. I knew we had to be cautious, lest Kael fall into the wrong hands, subjected to tests and confinement, or worse. Dr. Hayes, whose academic reputation stood as a bulwark of credibility, greeted Lieutenant Reynolds politely, offering clipped answers and carefully managed explanations. I, for my part, feigned a cheerful innocence, guiding the lieutenant through a perfunctory tour of the forest's glowing flora. When he asked about my personal research, I demurred, offering half-truths. We've been measuring changes in the forest's electromagnetic field, which could explain some of these bioluminescent properties. No, we haven't uncovered any unusual creatures. My heart raced, but I kept my demeanor calm. Lieutenant Reynolds showed little emotion. He scribbled a few notes, occasionally pausing to scan the treetops or examine the ground. Was he expecting to see footprints or signs of a struggle? Despite my best efforts, I suspected he sensed something amiss. On his second day of observation, Lieutenant Reynolds briefly disappeared from our camp, returning with mud stains on his uniform. Where he had gone, and what he had seen, remained a mystery. That night, Kael trembled, as though haunted by nightmares. I felt a swirl of fear in my mind, mingled with caution. Through our tenuous telepathic link, I understood that Kael perceived danger. He recognized Lieutenant Reynolds's single-minded pursuit, an unyielding force that would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. We had to protect him. We had to flee if necessary, but first, we needed information. We needed to understand why Kael's presence was so threatening and how far the conspiracy ran. A tense energy lingered in the air, like a storm about to break. I confided in Dr. Hayes, speaking in hushed tones over the crackling embers of our campfire. We both understood that our next steps could not be taken lightly, that one misstep might condemn Kael to captivity or expose us all to peril. We decided that, if need be, we would vanish into the forest, carrying Kael with us, continuing our research in secret. As we gazed at the glowing trees, a plan slowly formed. Our path was uncertain, but we were united in our resolve. Kael's quest was too important to abandon. The morning after our midnight council, we discovered that Lieutenant Reynolds had vanished without notice. His tent stood empty, the ground outside it disturbed by footprints. Dr. Hayes speculated that Reynolds had left in search of reinforcements, perhaps to summon additional investigators. We knew we had little time to act. Under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, we packed our equipment, loading it onto the battered off-road vehicle that had borne us into this wild place. Kael, still recovering from his wound, settled into the back seat, concealed beneath blankets. Fear pulsed through my veins, accompanied by a strange exhilaration. We were about to abandon the camp that had sheltered us for weeks, embarking on a journey into unknown territory, guided by a being from another world. We traveled slowly along hidden trails, forging a path toward the deeper reaches of the forest. There, among colossal vines and giant, centuries-old trees, we hoped to evade any pursuit. The forest itself seemed to close around us, its canopy forming a vast green cathedral that filtered the sunlight into mottled emerald patterns. Once we paused to observe a cluster of glowing orchids that dangled from a broken bough. Their pulsations matched the faint throbbing of Kael's aura, as though in sympathy. As the days passed, we noticed changes in Kael's demeanor. He became restless, gazing at the starry sky each night, as if longing for distant horizons. Sometimes, his alien features twisted in an expression of concern or urgency. He would point toward the southeast, uttering cryptic syllables that I took to be directions. Eventually, I realized he was guiding us toward the rumored location of one of the ancient climate control mechanisms. My curiosity and scientific fervor flared. If such a device truly existed, if it could indeed stabilize Earth's climate, we could not ignore its significance. Yet, a silent question persisted. If Kael's ancestors had abandoned these machines, who guarded them now? Were other forces at play, invisible in the labyrinth of trees and vines? The answers eluded me, but the weight of possibility urged us onward. Dr. Hayes, ever the scholar, kept meticulous notes, sketching the terrain, recording each shift in Kael's condition. Despite his skepticism, I sensed his excitement growing. He whispered, "If this is real, Evelyn, then we're standing on the cusp of a discovery that could define our era." Thus we pressed deeper into the wilderness, forging a bond of trust between alien and human. Kael's eyes would shine whenever I offered him food or water. In return, he would share small glimpses into his civilization's lore, images of towering crystalline structures, of swirling clouds parted by luminous towers that regulated winds and rainfall. Through halting telepathy, he communicated regret, a longing to right the mistakes of the past, mistakes that had begun when his people departed, believing Earth could flourish on its own. We moved carefully, using old trails marked on satellite maps, ever watchful for the presence of Lieutenant Reynolds or other government operatives. Though we had not yet confronted him again, I felt certain he lurked somewhere on our trail, following the faintest trace of footprints, driven by the iron call of duty. What I did not yet realize, what none of us realized, was how large the conspiracy truly was, or the lengths to which powerful men would go to keep Earth's fate in their grip. Our flight through the forest soon drew us into the company of unexpected allies. Word spread among the more environmentally conscious circles that Dr. Hayes and I, accompanied by an unknown subject, were on the move. Rumors were whispered in academic forums, in hushed conversations among activists, in cryptic messages on secure channels. We began to receive discreet notes of support, offers of sanctuary, and requests to share what we had found. At first, we dismissed them, fearful of betrayal. But an old friend of Dr. Hayes, a botanist named Marisol Vega, managed to intercept us at a hidden clearing where a narrow brook cut through a small valley. She arrived with two companions, Jonah Reed, a climate activist known for his daring protests, and Akari Fujiwara, a brilliant engineer who specialized in renewable technologies. Their eyes glittered with curiosity when they first beheld Kael, quietly resting against a tree, the light of the forest reflecting in his alien gaze. We held a tense conversation under a rocky overhang while the sun dipped behind the canopy, leaving us in a twilight world of soft glows. Dr. Hayes laid out the story in measured tones, explaining our discovery of Kael, the alien's mission, and the precarious implications. Marisol listened, brows knitted in concentration. Jonah paced, clenching and unclenching his fists, clearly torn between skepticism and excitement. Akari asked pointed questions. How exactly do these ancient mechanisms control the climate? Are they tapping into geothermal energy or manipulating atmospheric pressure? Kael observed them with cautious curiosity, occasionally providing flashes of telepathic input that only I could sense. He approved of their sincerity, reassured by the compassion that emanated from Marisol and Akari. Jonah, for all his restless energy, radiated a bold determination. We decided, then and there, to form an alliance. We would combine our skills to locate the ancient mechanisms, record evidence that might galvanize the world into taking drastic steps to restore the environment and protect Kael from hostile forces. That same evening, as we shared a modest meal of dried fruits and grains, I felt the stirrings of hope. My entire life had been devoted to the study of ecology, the desperate attempt to preserve what was left of nature's bounty. Yet I had always sensed that my work, for all its significance, was overshadowed by larger political and corporate machinations. Now, in the glow of the forest, with Kael's presence lending an almost sacred importance to our cause, I believed real change was possible. Perhaps we could stand against the powerful. Perhaps we could reveal the truth that Earth itself was meant to be nurtured, not exploited. The alliance was fragile, yet it was underpinned by mutual necessity and the fervent desire to save our planet. We spent that night sharing knowledge, preparing for the challenges ahead. By the time dawn broke, sending soft rays of light through the trembling leaves, we had solidified our unity. We would follow Kael's guidance to the rumored location of the first climate device, perhaps hidden near the southwestern reaches of the forest. And we would remain vigilant, for Lieutenant Reynolds and his superiors would not rest until Kael was in their custody, or worse. Our new allies led us to an uncharted stretch of rainforest that sprawled beyond known routes, a territory dotted with steep ravines, hidden waterfalls, and trees so tall their tops vanished in the morning mist. Navigating this green labyrinth tested our endurance and our resolve. Vines draped from branches like serpents, tangling in our path. Thorn-laden underbrush scraped our legs and arms, and biting insects left us weary each evening. Yet, amid the discomfort, we witnessed wonders that filled our hearts with reverence. Glowing fungi lit the bases of ancient trunks, forming natural lanterns. Once, we stumbled upon a hidden grove where delicate silver petals lay strewn across the ground, their perfume so intoxicating that Kael paused to inhale deeply, his eyes half closing in bliss. We pressed on, guided by Kael's faint telepathic urgings, shaped by cryptic signals he sensed from the environment. Sometimes, at dusk, he would kneel and place his hand upon the earth, as though listening to vibrations we could not perceive. Meanwhile, our group grew closer. Jonah's cynicism softened in the face of Kael's obvious sincerity. Akari probed Kael's limited explanations, trying to theorize how his people's technology might interface with Earth's natural processes. Dr. Hayes occasionally recorded notes about new plant species that displayed unusual adaptability, suspecting they might have been subtly influenced by alien interventions centuries ago. As for me, I found comfort in the sense of purpose that bound us all together. No longer was I an isolated ecologist in a remote forest. I was part of something much bigger, something that might redefine humanity's future. Even so, danger loomed. At times, we caught glimpses of movement in the distance, shapes that fled at our approach. Once, Jonah found footprints in the mud near a riverbank, footprints that seemed too regular and heavy to belong to a wandering tribe. We suspected that Lieutenant Reynolds's men, or government operatives of a similar ilk, were shadowing our progress, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite these tensions, Kael's health improved with each passing day. His wound began to heal, leaving only a faint scar that shimmered under the moonlight. His telepathy grew more coherent, allowing me to perceive fleeting words in my mind. Danger. Seek. Mechanism. Freed. Strung together. These words offered us a sense of both caution and urgency. Something beckoned to him from deep in the rainforest, something that promised both salvation and risk. Thus we advanced, driven by hope, united by necessity. Each night, we huddled together, exchanging stories and theories, dreaming of a future in which Earth's climate might stabilize once more, in which the planet could heal from centuries of exploitation. The air seemed charged with possibility, as though the forest itself stood ready to reveal ancient secrets, waiting only for us to prove our worth. It was near twilight on the 12th day of our journey when Kael abruptly halted. We stood in a clearing framed by immense banyan roots, twisting and looping like petrified snakes. Moss-laden stones jutted from the soil in uneven rows, remnants of a structure that time had swallowed. Kael's hand rose, pointing toward what appeared to be a partially buried archway. His eyes glowed faintly, and I felt a wave of anticipation sweep through him. Underneath layers of vine and dirt, we discerned the outline of a doorway, carved with motifs reminiscent of swirling wind and flowing water. With determined effort, we cleared the entrance, revealing a dark corridor that sloped downward. Stale air issued forth, carrying the sense of damp rock and ancient dust. Jonah found a small metal plaque set into the stone, engraved with symbols that matched the patterns on Kael's skin. He glanced at me, breath catching in excitement. "We must be cautious," Dr. Hayes whispered. "We have no idea what's inside." Nevertheless, curiosity overruled caution. One by one, we slipped through the archway, switching on flashlights and carefully stepping over fallen debris. Kael led the way, seeming to navigate by instinct. I remembered what he had told me, that his people hid climate control mechanisms in temples or underground installations, safeguarding them from misuse. If this was indeed one such site, we stood on the threshold of something extraordinary. Carvings on the walls illustrated scenes of beings tending to Earth's ecosystems, guiding storms away from fragile coasts, irrigating deserts, and nurturing forests. The style blended seamlessly with ancient human art, suggesting a cross-cultural exchange that had long since faded from recorded history. My breath quivered with awe. This was a testament to what might have been, an era when guardianship, rather than exploitation, defined our relationship with nature. At length, we reached a large chamber where a central dais rose from the floor, flanked by panels of smooth crystal. The panels, though coated with dust, still glowed faintly, as though powered by a hidden energy source. Kael stepped forward, pressing his hand against one of the panels. A faint hum reverberated through the air, and the crystal lit up in soft blues and greens. Akari approached, running her fingers across the surface, eyes wide. "This is advanced," she breathed. "It might be some form of energy interface. If we can power it up, maybe we can see what it does." Jonah, meanwhile, hovered at the edge, scanning the darkness for signs of traps or watchers. Dr. Hayes began photographing the inscriptions on the walls. I stood beside Kael, feeling the slow crescendo of his thoughts in my mind. He sensed that we were close to unlocking a dormant power, yet a hint of caution threaded his emotions. Before us lay an artifact from a bygone epoch, its purpose unclear, its capabilities vast. Were we prepared to activate such a device? What if it failed, or worse, if it succeeded in ways we did not anticipate? Our reflections glimmered in the crystal surface as Kael pressed a second panel. A low rumble shuddered beneath our feet, and a hidden mechanism stirred in the bowels of the earth. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the hum grew louder. The faint glow intensified until the entire chamber was bathed in swirling patterns of light. Then, just as abruptly, the lights dimmed once more, as though the mechanism had only half awoken. Silence enveloped us. Kael turned to me, his gaze earnest, and I felt a surge of regret and longing wash over our link. He telepathically conveyed an image of the device fully functional, stabilizing weather systems across continents. But it needed more power, or perhaps it needed a key, a sequence of activations that had to be performed at multiple sites scattered across the globe. This was but the first step. We would have to find the others if Earth was to be restored. A heavy responsibility weighed upon my shoulders. Even as we basked in our discovery, I could not dispel the feeling that we had stirred forces best left sleeping, or that might transform the future if awakened anew. Our euphoria was short-lived. No sooner had we returned to the surface, blinking in the dusk, than we found ourselves surrounded by armed agents. They emerged from behind trunks and vines, silent as shadows, their weapons leveled at us. At their head stood Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, clad in camouflage fatigues, a grim set to his jaw. He offered no greeting, no preamble. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered, voice low and authoritative. Our group complied, hearts pounding. Kael stiffened, trembling with an undercurrent of fear that I could feel through our tenuous mental link. I prayed silently that he would not make any sudden moves. Dr. Hayes tried to speak calmly. "Lieutenant, this is unnecessary. We pose no threat." But Reynolds was unmoved. His gaze swept over each of us, pausing longest on Kael. "That creature," he said, "belongs in government custody. We have reason to believe it poses a national security risk." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Light from the glowing leaves glinted on gun barrels, painting the scene in an eerie luminescence. Marisol and Jonah exchanged a desperate look. Akari clenched her fists. I felt helpless, uncertain how to de-escalate the situation. Kael's eyes darted, searching for an escape that did not exist. Lieutenant Reynolds's expression betrayed no pity. He gestured for his men to bind our wrists with plastic restraints. My heart sank. I caught a glimpse of Kael's wide, anxious eyes, and his telepathic voice rippled inside me. A question: why harm? Only help. Tears blurred my vision. How to explain that fear and mistrust drove these men? That a secret this large threatened the balance of power and the illusions propping up a complacent system? We were marched to a makeshift camp some distance away, ringed by tall fences and floodlights. The arrival of night accentuated the cold efficiency of the operation. There, under the harsh glow of spotlights, government officials awaited us. They wore severe expressions, their suits crisp and unruffled despite the jungle's heat. I recognized one of them, a man from the Department of Defense who had once dismissed environmental research as exaggerated claims. He regarded Kael with thinly veiled horror, as if the very sight of him contradicted everything he believed about Earth's place in the cosmos. A flurry of interrogation ensued. Dr. Hayes was separated from me, while Jonah, Marisol, and Akari were taken to another area. Kael was forced onto a gurney, pinned by 2 guards, while a grim-faced medic prepared a sedative. Panic surged through me. If they sedated Kael, if they imprisoned him, how would we ever reach the other mechanisms? How would Earth stand a chance against the ravages of climate change? I struggled against my restraints, shouting pleas that fell on deaf ears. Lieutenant Reynolds watched impassively, arms crossed. In that moment, I saw the depth of his conviction. He believed he was protecting his nation, safeguarding humanity from an unknown alien threat. Yet I also sensed a flicker of doubt in his eyes as he gazed at Kael's trembling form. Perhaps something in him understood this was not a monster bent on destruction, but a being compelled by duty and empathy. Nevertheless, the wheels of bureaucracy and fear ground on, indifferent to the tears that streaked my face. I was hauled off to a holding area, where 2 guards stood watch. My mind spun with despair, certain we had lost everything. The forest around us seemed to shimmer in quiet sorrow, the luminous plants flickering like distant candles. I feared for Kael's life. I feared for the planet's future, and for the secrets that might die alongside our alien companion. I do not know how much time passed, hours or perhaps an entire day, before chaos broke loose in the camp. Shouts echoed through the darkness, floodlights swung frantically, and the crackle of gunfire raked the still air. My guards stiffened, exchanging alarmed glances. For a moment, they hesitated, then one of them rushed outside to investigate, leaving only a single soldier to watch me. Through the open flap of the makeshift holding tent, I glimpsed silhouettes darting among the floodlights, men shouting orders. A burst of brilliance stung my eyes, and I heard the familiar voice of Jonah calling my name, telling me to get down. Then something whizzed overhead, and the soldier standing guard collapsed, stunned by a non-lethal projectile. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering, and dashed toward Jonah, who was beckoning me frantically from the shadows. He wore a look of wild exhilaration. "We had some help," he hissed, clutching my arm. "Activists and a few sympathetic insiders. We had to break you out, Evelyn. They were going to move Kael to a secret facility. We might not have gotten another chance." I barely had time to respond before he dragged me through the confusion. Lights swung wildly, illuminating fleeing figures, overturned crates, and the stunned forms of soldiers lying on the ground. I caught sight of Marisol and Akari rushing ahead, their arms full of gear. Dr. Hayes stumbled beside them, looking breathless but determined. A small band of armed activists flanked them, using a combination of smoke grenades and improvised flashbangs to disorient Reynolds's forces. My thoughts whirled. "Where's Kael?" I shouted, panic rising in my throat. Jonah pointed to a medical tent at the far end of the compound, half hidden by swirling smoke. "Last we saw, they had him sedated in there. But there's a window. Hurry!" My heart lurched. I sprinted toward the tent, ignoring the gunshots that rang out behind me. Inside, amid the acrid smell of antiseptics, I found Kael strapped to a table and 4 lines snaking into his arm. His eyes fluttered at my approach, consciousness flickering. I tore off the restraints, ripping the line out. He winced, and emerald blood beaded where the needle had been. I could feel his relief as our minds brushed. Weak though he was, his slender arms clung to me, desperate for support. Dimly, I heard footsteps outside, voices commanding everyone to stand down. A final flashbang went off, and the tent wall rippled. Jonah burst in, pressing a hand against Kael's side to help me lift him. "We have to go. Now," he yelled, eyes darting with urgency. We emerged into a swirl of chaos. The activists had succeeded in disabling key security points, and the campsite had been thrown into disarray. Lieutenant Reynolds was nowhere to be seen, perhaps pinned down or regrouping. With Kael half supported between us, we fled into the jungle's embrace. Overhead, the moon glowed faintly through shifting clouds, illuminating our frenzied flight. Twice, we heard Reynolds's voice bellowing orders for pursuit. But the thick undergrowth swallowed us, the luminous flora guiding our footsteps through hidden paths. Marisol, Akari, and Dr. Hayes soon caught up, each battered and breathless but unbroken. Their eyes shone with a fierce resolve. We pressed on, forging deeper into the wild. The knowledge of what we had witnessed, the labyrinthine conspiracy that sought to control or exploit Kael's technology, galvanized us. In that hour of desperation, we vowed to move swiftly, to find the remaining mechanisms before they could be seized or sabotaged. Only then, we believed, could we restore Earth's climate to its rightful balance. Word of our escape and the existence of Kael's mission spread like wildfire among clandestine circles. More activists rallied to our cause, providing safe houses and resources. Scientists sympathetic to the environment made discreet inquiries. Some risked their careers to pass us intelligence on government movements. Kael, for his part, grew stronger, though the sedation had rattled his alien physiology. Through our telepathic link, Kael conveyed a renewed urgency. We had to find the last temple, the crucial one that housed a central control mechanism capable of synchronizing all the other devices scattered around the planet. Failure to activate it would doom the partial reawakening we had triggered, leaving the climate in a state of chaos. Our ragtag coalition set forth on a final trek. Accompanied by a small cadre of volunteers, we traversed remote landscapes, deserts where scorching winds tore at our clothes, high plateaus battered by storms, and at last, another thick rainforest whose canopy rose so high that daylight barely kissed the ground. It was there, beyond hidden waterfalls and dangerous ravines, that Kael led us to a cavern entrance, half concealed behind a rushing torrent of water. The roar of the falls nearly drowned our voices as we slipped inside, flashlights piercing the dark. Almost at once, we sensed the presence of something vast and humming, an ancient energy that pulsed through the air. The cavern's walls sparkled with crystals, reflecting our lights in all directions. Great columns, carved with swirling shapes, stretched upward like petrified guardians. At the far end stood a monumental door inlaid with glowing glyphs, reminiscent of the site we had found before. Kael approached it, fingers trembling, pressing a sequence of sigils. Each contact caused a wave of colored light to ripple across the surface. My breath caught in wonder. Then the door slid open with a deep rumble, revealing a grand hall beyond. Rows of translucent pillars thrummed with life, connected by webs of luminescent strands that glowed in shifting patterns of green and gold. In the center lay a circular platform, ringed by alien inscriptions and metallic rods. "Is this the core device?" Marisol asked, her voice hushed in awe. Kael nodded, sending me an impression of confirmation. I relayed his response. "Yes, this is the master control. If activated, it will harmonize the other mechanisms. But he senses there's a risk. The sudden shift in climate stabilization might trigger extreme weather patterns unless carefully calibrated." Fear mingled with my excitement. The line between salvation and calamity was perilously thin. Our group set to work. Akari and Dr. Hayes used their combined expertise to analyze the control panel's readings. Jonah and Marisol stood watch at the entrance, mindful of possible pursuers. Kael, meanwhile, circled the platform, occasionally placing his palm against the pillars, as though coaxing them to life with telepathic guidance. I felt the hair on the back of my neck prickle. We were close to unlocking a power that could reshape the world. Yet, deep down, I knew Lieutenant Reynolds would not give up so easily. Forces beyond him, too, might be converging. How many corporate interests, political figures, and secret agencies had grown comfortable with the slow decline of Earth, content to exploit resources until the last drop. They would fight this new paradigm if it threatened their profits and control. We toiled late into the night, calibrating alien controls whose logic eluded us. Kael's mental prompts guided us, but the translation between his knowledge and human technology was far from perfect. At last, near dawn, we believed we had the final sequence. A hush fell over the hall as Kael stood at the platform's center, raising his arms. The rods glowed more brightly, forming a lattice of light overhead. The crystals pulsed in tandem, beating like a cosmic heart. Just as Kael prepared to initiate the final activation, voices echoed from the cavern entrance. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, accompanied by the click of weapons. Lieutenant Reynolds and his men had arrived, their faces set in grim determination. We had run out of time. The confrontation happened in an instant. Reynolds barked orders, demanding we stand down and surrender the alien. Activists who had accompanied us hurried to form a barricade, brandishing makeshift defenses. Shots rang out, ricocheting off stone walls. Kael stumbled backward, nearly toppling from the platform as bullets whistled through the air. Jonah and Marisol rushed to shield Kael, while Akari and Dr. Hayes ducked behind a crystal pillar. My heart thundered. The final moment of truth had arrived, overshadowed by violence and fear. I could see the anguish on Lieutenant Reynolds's face as he directed his men. Perhaps a part of him regretted the bloodshed. But the chain of command and the pressure of hidden superiors demanded he obey. Sparks flew from the pillars as stray bullets struck them, distorting the flickering patterns of light. Kael cried out, telepathic anguish surging through my mind. I stumbled, disoriented by the psychic wave. Then I felt a jolt, a fierce resolution, ignite within Kael's thoughts. He knew what had to be done. With one final, desperate effort, he ignored the gunfire and sprinted back to the platform, pressing his hands against the glowing rods. The entire chamber vibrated as the device woke. Columns of brilliant luminescence cascaded upward, weaving a lattice in midair. The walls shuddered, dust drifting from the ceiling in a swirling cloud. In that moment, Lieutenant Reynolds hesitated, perhaps fearing the cavern would collapse, or perhaps overcome by the staggering display of alien power. His men faltered in their assault, glancing at one another in confusion. Taking advantage of the lull, Jonah and Marisol tackled the nearest soldiers, disarming them. Dr. Hayes and Akari shielded the console, frantically adjusting controls to complete the sequence Kael had begun. Kael's voice, a silent cry in my mind, shattered my heart. Must finish. Earth depends can't hold. He staggered, blood trickling from his side. Something about activating the device placed a monumental strain on him, as if it required a sacrifice that drained his life force. Without hesitation, I raced onto the platform, ignoring the blasts that reverberated through the chamber. I threw my arms around Kael, tears burning my eyes. "No, you'll die," I sobbed, though I sensed he could not change the outcome. His telepathic presence calmed me, a gentle acceptance that mingled with profound sadness. Then he pressed a final series of glyphs. The rods flared in a luminous crescendo, so blinding that I shut my eyes, feeling the heat wash over me in waves. A thunderous boom echoed, followed by a shockwave that knocked Reynolds's men off their feet. The entire cavern seemed poised on the brink of collapse. And then, as quickly as it began, the blinding light receded, leaving us in relative silence. I blinked to clear my vision, heart pounding. Kael lay in my arms, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps, the shimmering lines on his skin fading. The device now shone with a steady, gentle radiance, indicating it had completed its task. Earth's climate, if Kael's knowledge was correct, would begin to rebalance, guided by the lattice of mechanisms across the globe. Lieutenant Reynolds scrambled to his feet, glancing around at the battered remains of his squad. The pillars no longer emitted any threatening surge, but their soft glow revealed a changed atmosphere, a sense that something cosmic had been set right. I saw doubt flicker in his eyes as he realized the conflict might be over, that Kael's sacrifice was not an act of aggression, but an act of salvation. I clung to Kael, tears streaming down my face as I felt his life ebb. His gaze locked onto mine, sending a final message, an outpouring of gratitude, sorrow, and hope. Then, his eyes drifted closed, and the luminous spark in his body dimmed. A ragged cry tore from my throat, echoed by Jonah, Marisol, and Akari, who rushed to my side. Even Dr. Hayes, stoic and rational, knelt in stunned grief. For a breathless moment, we all knelt there, allies and enemies alike, in the presence of this alien being who had given everything to save a planet that was not even his own. In the uneasy aftermath, Lieutenant Reynolds seemed shaken. He signaled his men to lower their weapons. Some of them did so reluctantly, while others, clearly moved by what they had witnessed, laid down arms without protest. The echoing chamber thrummed with the aftereffects of the activation. A faint breeze stirred the air, carrying the scent of damp earth and possibility. As Kael's body lay still, a curious phenomenon began to unfold. The alien's form glowed faintly, then dissolved into delicate motes of light that drifted upward, as though carried by an invisible wind. We watched, struck silent by awe, as these motes merged with the luminous structure above. The light suffused the pillars, dancing across the alien inscriptions, and then, gently, it faded. Kael was gone, leaving behind only the memory of his features and the selfless deed he had performed. In the hush that followed, Dr. Hayes rose, turning to Lieutenant Reynolds with an expression of trembling dignity. "Are you going to arrest us now, Lieutenant? Are you going to bury this, pretend none of it happened?" Reynolds stared at the platform, his face drawn. He seemed older somehow, deflated by the weight of realization. I don't know," he replied, voice faltering. "None of my training prepared me for this. What I saw, he saved us all, didn't he?" Jonah approached him, fist still clenched. "He saved the world. If this mechanism does what we think it does, now help us let the world know." Marisol and Akari nodded their agreement. After a long silence, Reynolds exhaled, shoulders sagging. "I was following orders," he murmured. "I believed I was protecting our country, but it seems there was more at stake than I ever knew." He glanced around at his men, many of whom wore conflicted expressions. Some lowered their eyes. Others nodded, perhaps realizing that the old paradigms of fear and secrecy could no longer hold. That day marked a turning point. Word spread of Kael's sacrifice, of the temple with its climate-stabilizing technology, and of the darkness that powerful figures had tried to keep hidden. Though official channels attempted damage control, the tide of public sentiment turned swiftly. Leaked images and videos, along with testimonies from activists and scientists, made their way into the public consciousness. News outlets clamored for answers, while grassroots movements seized the narrative, calling for transparency and ecological responsibility. It was not an easy battle. The entrenched elite fought to discredit the story, labeling it a hoax or foreign propaganda. However, the sudden shifts in global weather patterns provided tangible proof. Over the following months, storms that had threatened coastlines dispersed more gently. Areas plagued by drought saw sporadic rainfall. Gradually, the planet's climate indicators began to move in a favorable direction, as though guided by an invisible hand. Faced with mounting evidence, governments had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. A wave of public outcry demanded an end to the secrecy, an end to destructive policies, and a renewed commitment to preserving Earth's balance. A global reckoning took shape, uniting leaders, corporations, and citizens in a new quest for sustainability. And at the heart of it all was the memory of Kael, the alien guardian who had once walked silently among us, offering salvation and hope. In the years that followed, I found myself thrust into an unforeseen role. No longer just a field ecologist, I became a spokesperson for a new era of collaboration between scientific research and environmental stewardship. Many people were eager to learn about Kael and the ancient race that had once tended Earth's climate. Scientists formed international coalitions to study the newly activated mechanisms, ensuring they were maintained responsibly. Policymakers, under intense public scrutiny, began to shift resources into ecological restoration and sustainable technology. Dr. Hayes continued his research, publishing groundbreaking papers on xenobiology and alien environmental engineering. His once staunch skepticism had softened, replaced by a wide-eyed wonder at the universe's vast possibilities. Jonah, Marisol, and Akari each found their own paths. Jonah harnessed his fervor to advocate environmental justice across the globe. Marisol built networks of community projects to restore damaged ecosystems. Akari worked at the forefront of engineering solutions that complemented the alien mechanisms, ensuring humanity would not rely solely on ancient technology, but also invest in its own innovative spirit. Lieutenant Reynolds quietly retired from active service, rumored to be advising newly formed committees on interspecies ethics and security. Some whispered that he was haunted by the memory of Kael, forever changed by the realization of how close he had come to destroying Earth's only hope. As for me, I never forgot the feeling of Kael's thoughts intertwining with mine, the warmth of his gratitude, and the weight of his sorrow. Sometimes, in the midst of my duties, I would pause beneath a blooming tree or beside a tranquil shoreline, recalling the day he transformed into shimmering motes of light. Perhaps a part of him remained within the planet's renewed life force, woven into the tapestry of the mechanisms he once guarded. On the anniversary of his sacrifice, we gathered in the forest where I had first met him. The place had changed. New growth thrived, and the glow of bioluminescent flora had spread, as though rejuvenated by the planet's healing climate. A circle of scientists, activists, and everyday citizens joined hands in a quiet vigil. We lit lanterns that floated among the luminous leaves, dancing like starlight in the air. And we remembered Kael, the alien beast many once feared, yet who was, in truth, a guardian and a friend. In that solemn hush, I whispered a vow to honor Kael's memory by pushing humanity forward, by ensuring we learned from our mistakes and protected our planet from greed and recklessness. I felt, in the stir of the wind and the soft glow of the foliage, an answering presence, a sense that Kael's spirit lingered, watching over us from within Earth's newfound equilibrium. The world did not become a utopia overnight. Economies struggled to adapt, industries resisted change, and old habits died hard. But the revelations sparked by Kael's story and the resurrected alien mechanisms ignited a collective awakening. Grassroots movements flourished. Young people flocked to the study of ecology and sustainable engineering, inspired by the possibility that humans could coexist harmoniously with nature. Piece by piece, the conspiracy that once sought to control or hide Kael's technology unraveled. Officials resigned or were prosecuted. Whistleblowers stepped forward, armed with documentation of clandestine projects meant to profit from environmental disaster. Over time, these revelations reshaped public policy, reinforcing the notion that the planet's health was inseparable from humanity's survival. In remote corners of the world, teams continued to find lesser climate control devices, small satellites of the main system, that integrated new scientific discoveries with alien ingenuity. Forests regrew, oceans grew calmer, weather patterns stabilized. The journey toward full restoration would take decades, perhaps centuries, but the pivot had been made. We stood upon a new threshold, one defined not by conflict with our environment, but by understanding and mutual care. As I look back on those tumultuous events, I am filled with a sense of gratitude and wonder. The night I found Kael, wounded and alone among the glowing leaves, I could never have guessed the destiny that awaited us. His race once protected Earth, and though they left our planet ages ago, their final envoy, Kael, risked everything to return. It was humans, in the end, who refused to abandon him, who recognized the precious gift he carried and stood beside him against forces of fear and oppression. Sometimes, in the stillness of early dawn, I sense a gentle whisper at the edge of my thoughts, a quiet reassurance that Kael's sacrifice was not in vain. And though sorrow still lingers for the friend we lost, I find comfort in the knowledge that Earth breathes more freely because of him. Humanity, for all our faults, has risen to the challenge, forging a new path defined by respect for our shared home. Should you ever wander through that ancient forest, beneath the dance of bioluminescent petals and vines that shimmer in the night air, pause for a moment, close your eyes, and listen. Perhaps you, too, will feel Kael's presence, a faint pulse in the deep, living heart of the earth he so cherished. In that echo lies our hope and our promise, a testament to the enduring power of courage, unity, and love. And so our story, touched by sacrifice, yet culminating in the promise of renewal, ends on a note of cautious joy. Earth, once again, finds balance. Humanity, at long last, embraces harmony with the planet we call home. Kael's memory endures in every gentle breeze, in every newborn sapling, and in the steady pulse of nature's radiant heartbeat. And in that shared legacy, we find our happy ending, a dawn of infinite possibility for generations yet to come.